Yeah, it's been great. I've been on the festival tour with this film for nearly a year now, and this could probably be my last festival
yeah.
with the film. So I'm trying to make the most of it. But yeah, having a very good time in Stockholm. Went to the opening night party last night.
Yeah, was it fun?
It was great. There was a punk band.
All
It was
right,
deafening.
yeah.
But yeah, I had a great time. Yeah, the film's called Zodiac Killer Project, and it's a film about my failed attempt to make a true crime documentary. I had spent a few years developing a film about the Zodiac Killer, the sort of infamous California serial killer who struck in the late 1960s. And right at the point that I was about to start producing the film, unfortunately, the negotiations for the rights to the true crime book that it was going to be based on fell through. And so this film is kind of me grappling with not being able to make that true crime doc, and instead kind of getting to grips with true crime itself and thinking about what drives it and why it's become so incredibly dominant in my industry, the documentary film industry. So I mean, you know, I've worked in documentary for about a decade, so it's certainly not the first time I've had a film fall through. I could list off dozens of failed projects that I've had over the years. But for whatever reason, this one was the one that I really couldn't let go of. And in the months after it fell through, I found myself just describing it to friends. Like, I had imagined all these scenes in kind of like beat by beat and image by image exactly how they were going to play out, and I would find myself just sitting around with friends describing that to them in like desperate detail. And so eventually that started to seem like an interesting subject for film. That feeling of an unrealized creative ambition. And so the first thing that kind of prompted me to make Zodiac Killer Project was not even the idea of critiquing true crime, although that's obviously what it became, but it was just that idea of, you know, what it is to have a creative dream that can't be realized. I mean, I think true crime is kind of the ultimate passive genre in some ways, at least the way it's become over the last few years. You know, the formula, especially of, you know, a certain kind of like streaming true crime, has become so rigid that it's really easy just to put it on and barely think about it. And, you know, I've got enough friends who work in true crime or who've made true crime shows or films, and this is what they tell me, that, you know, the commissioners and the streaming platforms really want it to be as passive an experience as possible. You know, there's this horrifying phrase of second screen content, which is the idea that if people are on their phones, they can still more or less tell what's going on without looking at the screen. And so the appeal to me of making Zodiac Killer Project was, can I take something like that is designed to be very passive and encourage the viewer to have a more active relationship to it, so that you're kind of hearing this story be told, and you're hearing about, you know, you're hearing those familiar beats of a true crime film, but you're being encouraged to think about like how they work and why they work. And hopefully, you know, you then take that and you become a little bit more active the next time you watch. Yeah, I think that's kind of the ultimate question, is like, do the tropes of a genre, especially one as formulaic as true crime, do they help you or do they hinder you? Like, in some ways they're really helpful because they work as shorthand. So, you know, you can show one of those very familiar true crime images and it can save you a huge amount of time because everyone knows what those images mean. You know, if you see like the detective fanning all the paperwork out across the table, you immediately understand, like, oh, this is an investigative scene, and he's like looking through all the evidence to find that one clue that's going to crack open the case. And you don't really need to spell any of that out. You can just show that one image, and we've seen it 100 times before, so we know what it means. But then if you do that too much, obviously it becomes kind of numbing and banal.
Yeah.
So I think certainly the appeal to me of working within any genre is working out how often to conform with the formula and how often to push against it. And maybe the unfortunate thing about true crime as it's manifested in the last few years is that there's so much more conforming than pushing against the model. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, for me, the appeal of working in documentary at all is that you are kind of bound by the truth. You're bound by reality, and so documentary can never be like a perfect representation of reality because there's so much translation that happens, but you have reality as like a tension to work against, and I find that very productive. I think true crime and other sort of non-fiction genres that have a certain formula often push about as hard as you can against that tension of reality because they're trying to craft a very familiar story. And so you do, I mean, it does literally happen that people will script interviews ahead of time because they know what they want their interviewee to say. And that doesn't mean that they give the interviewee the script and tell them, here, say this, read it like this, but they ask questions in a certain way where they can be pretty confident they're going to get the answers they want. And that feels in some ways like a betrayal of documentary, but it's also kind of an inevitable, even if you're not doing it that directly, it's kind of inevitable because you're still a person with a subjective view on the story and a certain idea about how you want it told, and I think it's very hard not to enforce your view of things on the subject matter, however hard you try. So this was an odd instance where I really had planned everything out much too early, in fact, because as any documentary filmmaker will tell you, you shouldn't really do anything until you have the rights to the story you're telling. And I made that mistake and basically spent 2 years like mapping it all out in my head before I had the rights to actually make the thing. So then when the rights fell through, I was left with just all of these images and all of these stories and all of these scenes that I had imagined in a very precise way in my head. So in this case, I certainly had done a lot of pre-planning, mistakenly.
Then you had to do something with it.
And then I had no choice but to have a kind of exorcism. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that made me want to make the film in the first place was I feel like there's a huge amount of discussion in newspapers and on podcasts and everywhere else about why people want to watch true crime. And it often puts a lot of judgment on the viewer.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, and I think it's worthwhile asking why people want to watch stuff that, as you say, is very morbid and in some ways quite ethically problematic. But I think there's a whole other side of the equation that's often ignored, which is why people like me, people in the documentary world, are making so much of this material. Yeah. And the easy answer for us is that, we're just keeping up with demand. The people want it, and so we're going to make as much of it as they want. But I'm not sure that it's that simple, and I think it's just as likely that people's appetite for true crime is being driven by how much endless supply there is. Because speaking, at least for myself, most of the true crime I watch is not me sitting down intentionally to watch true crime. It's getting home, turning on a streaming service, and it's the first thing that pops up. So I think there's two sides to this, there's the people making it and the people watching it. Sometimes, as with me, those are one and the same. But yeah, I think it's very hard to pin down exactly which is driving the other. This is a very underwhelming answer to this question that inevitably I get asked as I tour this film around, but no, I'm actually not working on anything at the moment. I'm doing a lot of editing for other filmmakers. And so after making a film that's like very much me being trapped in my own creative frustration, I'm taking a bit of time off and getting trapped in other people's creative frustration. I think it'll definitely, I mean, there's definitely lots of aspects of this film that I would like to carry forward.
Yeah.
Namely, like the narration, obviously, which is so much of my own voice, is something that in the past I always would have quite tightly scripted. And I think when you script in that way, you kind of take some of the spontaneity out of it.
Yeah.
And by contrast, the narration here was all improvised, albeit around extensive notes. And I found that a really valuable tool to like maintain the sense of spontaneity that existed in the story for me.